Fuck around, make my 40 pop. No popcorn, I pop pistols, reaming my body.
Alright guys, Boruto episode 251 review. This episode right here kind of mimicked the last episode, where I should say the entertainment value mimicked the last episode. The last episode was absolutely impeccable, similar with this episode as well. And I think the two deaths kind of made it really stand out, specifically the Syrian death and also the Isari death. First things first, I definitely like to talk about the Isari death because that's exactly what happened in this particular episode. Isari's death, in my personal opinion, it's going to be extremely underrated just because of the sheer fact that it happened so easily. Isari is supposed to be a character that is extremely strong. He's the son of Aromi, the leader of the Funato clan. This guy is actually very formidable. Not only that, he also did lead the army for a very long time. The reason why his death was so easily done by Aromi, he had a new son to replace Isari, which was Ikada. And I think this right here, again, just goes on with the actual storyline of Boruto versus Ikada. Boruto now trying to be the person to actually stop the war, while Ikada is actually leading the charge for the other side of the war, which is absolutely bonkers. But again, the Isari death, in my personal opinion, goes on with like the trend of the Boruto anime over the past couple of episodes, where it's like they're not necessarily afraid to kill important characters to the actual storyline. Now again, this is like a two-sided sword type of thing. If you end up killing a lot of the actual important characters, you're left with no really important characters, and then it's just like a boring type of storyline. But if you do it just right, where you do have the requisite characters that are still important to the storyline, and also you are able to actually kill some important characters that we already did establish earlier were important characters, that right there is like the perfect intermediary. And now we have Ikada again leading the charge for the other side, a very important character, and also Aromi, a character that we think is going to be significantly stronger than all the other characters that we did see already in the actual arc. Those two characters, those two quote-unquote powerhouses, those two are still up. And I think this right here is going to make for an impeccable clash later on in the series. But now, Boruto's dilemma is going to be very interesting. I kind of talked about this in my podcast, and I kind of talked about this the last time that I didn't make a video about the anime. Boruto learned about the cycle of hatred, and he now wants to end the war. I forgot specifically who told me this phrase, but it matches perfectly. You can't necessarily call for an end in the war when you yourself spilled blood as well. And of course, the death of Isari, another reason why it was so very huge, is because Isari also wanted the war to end. Hypothetically, if Isari and Boruto met up before Isari did actually die, they would have had a much easier time of actually negotiating an end to the war than they are going to have right now, specifically Boruto and the rest of his team. Not only that, we also do have to point out the fact that Chojuro is getting a lot of respect. Coming into an arc like this, we kind of always thought that Chojuro may have actually been the weakest Kage of all time. Chojuro in the past couple of episodes, not necessarily strength wise, but just leadership, impressed a lot of us. And I think in this particular episode, him actually taking the time to sit down with Isari just right after learning the information that Kadatachi Kagura died, that right there is profound. Like, there's a lot of leaders out there, and Naruto himself, hypothetically, if Boruto died, I don't necessarily think that even Naruto out of everybody would be still bargaining for a peace deal. This man Chojuro literally lost his heir apparent, the person who he wanted to become Kage next. I mean, that right there is insane. For him to actually be sitting down with one of the enemies that potentially even killed Kagura, that right there was significant in itself. Now again, my respect for Chojuro goes much farther than that. I definitely do want to see him actually fight. I think they're lining up for two separate fights, Boruto versus Ikada and Aromi versus Chojuro. The bad thing about this, however, is that we haven't necessarily seen Aromi fight yet. We know that Aromi is probably the strongest character in the actual village, or the strongest character in the Funato clan, but specifically, how strong is he? I really, again, I don't want to see people die, but let's keep it 1,000. It's an anime. This is what we got to do. But Aromi got to pack a couple of people up. Aromi has to like completely disintegrate a group of like 100 shinobis or something like that, or potentially even kill an important character that we do know how strong they are. That right there is going to build up the respect level of Aromi, and I really do fear without any of that character development, they're just going to throw Aromi and Chojuro in an actual battle and say, hey, the winner is going to be Chojuro. The reason why I don't necessarily want that to happen is, again, a lot of people don't necessarily have the respect level of Chojuro as of right now. Hypothetically, he beats a character that we don't really know exactly how strong they are, it's not really going to mean much. But hypothetically, if Aromi is like absolutely backhanding Boruto while he has the Karma Seal on, absolutely demolishing Mitsuki, Sarada, and Kawaki, and then is actually struggling with Chojuro, then we'd have a lot more respect with Chojuro, mainly because we understand that Chojuro is most likely above even a group team 7 type of thing, and we could potentially even put him above like a deep or something like that. Like that right there would be significant in power scaling, and of course seeing exactly how strong a character like Chojuro is. This is what I want 1000%. If we're gonna actually come away with something from this arc, it has to be an accurate power scale for a lot of the Kages out there. But not only that, another thing that I definitely did want to talk about is of course Boruto taking action to actually end the war. This right is going to be interesting in itself. I'm more on the Kawaki side of things. Now don't get me wrong, the cycle of hatred is definitely a real thing. You should definitely try to stop the cycle of hatred, but if you're in the midst of a war, it's like you're not necessarily going out and seeking to kill people to actually start the cycle of war. This is a natural situation. You either kill or be killed. Boruto, in my personal opinion, speaking from a very idealistic perspective, and not only that, a very privileged perspective, mainly because Boruto, hypothetically, if he wasn't as strong as he was, he wouldn't necessarily be thinking, hey, maybe I shouldn't kill this guy that's trying to kill me, because it would probably start a cycle of hatred. A lot of the characters that are there aren't as strong as Boruto, doesn't necessarily have as much resources as Boruto. So if a character comes to them, hypothetically, if a character comes to Iwabe and tries to kill Iwabe, it's not feasible for him to not engage in battle. Now, I personally do believe that's what Kawaki is actually talking to Boruto about. So of course, if you're in a regular situation, hypothetically, you're on like a regular transport mission where you're trying to transport something or someone to a certain place, and some people try to actually rob you or something like that. Of course, you could say, hey, I'm not going to kill you or anything like that, but I'm going to subdue you, knock you out, and things such as that. But in a certain situation like this, when you're in a war, this is not an ideal place where you can actually exercise your quote-unquote ideals. Now, another big thing from this episode, of course, it has to be Ikada. Ikada is now going full emo mode, straight Sasuke, straight Kawaki, however you guys like to call it. He's full emo, and I think this right here is probably going to be good for the overall story. Let's keep it 1,000. We kind of already knew that Ikada was going to eventually end up fighting Boruto. Now it actually happened. I didn't necessarily comment on the actual design of Ikada. I absolutely love it. His design changed, his actual voice changed, his mannerism changed, and it had to be the case, man, because the Ikada that we did grow to know and love, he was extremely childish. This Ikada that we see right now is completely different, and we understand what really did it for him was, of course, the death of Siren. Not only the death of Siren, but what Siren was actually talking about at that particular time. She was essentially saying that her life, or what she was essentially fighting for, what she literally gave her life for, is of course for the Funato clan, of course for Ikada himself, to actually make her feel safe and make her feel comfortable in her last moments. He literally had to tell her a lie of, hey, the Funato clan won. And for that now to become true, Ikada now feels impelled or compelled to actually make it come true. And I think that this right here is exactly what's driving Ikada. Now, how Boruto is going to talk no jutsu, finesse and finagle, risk his way out of this situation, I have absolutely no idea, but it's definitely going to be an impeccable scene when it does come through to fruition. But let me know what you guys think about Boruto episode 251 in the comment section down below. It's me, your boy Barbie, and we out.
It's a knife.